Welcome to Fire Service Court Radio. My name is Brad Pinsky, and I'm your host. Today I have with me John Murphy, Chip Constock, and Kurt Verone. The four of us are lawyers. We work in various places throughout the nation, and we all represent fire departments, municipalities, and we speak frequently on fire department issues. Today we are at FDIC in Indy, and we have a special presentation. We want to talk about things we do in the fire service which may constitute harassing conduct and actually end up with a large monetary verdict against the actor or the fire department. We have a good example to start off with. I'm going to turn to John Murphy, and let's talk about a real-life example.
Well, recently there was a $2.5 million award in California to a female recruit firefighter in Recruit Academy, probationary firefighter, who ended up having all of the pre-training prior to getting in there. She graduated from a California training academy, was an EMT. She was a single mother, and so a lot of what occurred through the academy were there were a number of comments which became sexually harassing, comments that she found offense to, comments that were not taken seriously by the drill instructors or the chiefs, and so she filed a lawsuit. And the lawsuit was a considerable monetary award, and part of this was she was also given based on some testing scores and not the opportunity to change or correct the testing scores like the male firefighters had opportunity to do. She was given an opportunity to resign. And so under that sort of pressure, she resigned, retained an attorney. They litigated it. She won based on the sexual harassing comments she was a protected activity. She was a woman. Conduct unbecoming on the drill instructors, and then I talked to her the other day on the very issue, and she says that they're moving towards about $1 million in attorney's fees.
And you were the attorney on that.
Unfortunately, I wasn't, so I had to take the bus here. But it was interesting because when I read the news, because the whole situation interested me, and so I read the local newspapers, and they were just hammering her and the fact that she actually sued, and then the city in question, doesn't have any money, and the same thing was talked about this morning in the keynote address. There's the assault against the fire service because of budgetary issues, and how dare she sue the fire department. But I think it was activities on her part, trying to be a good recruit, was could have been at the top of her class, but for the fact that she was sexually harassed. And I think some of the comments related about her single motherhood, her inability to do the job. She wasn't given, the fair and equal opportunity to correct her scores like her male counterparts were. And so it was just too much to bear.
Let's talk about things we do in the fire service. We know generally, just to pick one of the laws, the Civil Rights Act prevents employers from discriminating in various ways against their employees based on race, sex, gender, ethnicity, sexual preference, etc. And the ways you can't discriminate are in terms of employment, compensation, job terms, etc., promotions, hirings, firings, leaves, transfers. What are some things we're doing in the fire service where if you could walk up to the guy and kind of slap him on the head, say, you can't do that, but we keep doing it, like the comment that's made, and all of a sudden it's multi-million dollars. Kurt, let me ask you, what are some things we're doing?
Well, I don't think the guys are thinking things through. And as you were just saying, the federal employment laws pertain to the fire department. And the typical firefighter doesn't think of himself as a representative of the fire department. In fact, sometimes there's a polarization where the firefighter thinks that the chief and the administration is the enemy. And in this particular case, in employment discrimination, in particular sexual harassment, the firefighter is a representative of the fire department. And when the firefighter says something or does some things, even well-intentioned or just joking around, and the typical type of stuff that happens in fire departments, there's consequences to the city. It's as if the city is doing that. And, I'm not familiar with all of the details in the Fresno case, but one of the things as I read some of the stuff about that, I thought about the ways that some of the drill instructors in the drill yard will provide tough love, almost like a drill sergeant in the military will provide tough love trying to encourage the trainee, whether it's a tough physical task, stretching a hose line or raising a ladder, but in trying to encourage them to push them beyond maybe what they think they're capable of, and how easy it would be for someone to sort of flip that around and make it seem that it's really harassment. It's just further evidence of harassment. Again, I don't know if that's what happened in Fresno, but certainly I don't think firefighters think like that. And sometimes they're just sort of mimicking the behavior of their drill instructors back when they were trainees. And I think in today's age, we've got to really think those things through.
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of it has to do, when I talked to her about this, wasn't the skill aspects. I mean, she was well skilled and she certainly could keep up with her male counterparts on all the physical activity. It was just the side comments, the little biting comments, the asking out for dates. I mean, there's just this whole rafts of these commentaries that were made to her by the drill instructors. And but I think physically, according to her and according to all the reports, she was at par with her counterparts.
And Chip, talk to us about the supervisor's responsibility, the department's responsibility once this stuff is happening.
Well, I can back up a second because of what John was saying. I've seen a couple cases where people have backgrounds that come to a particular department. They've either been on other departments or they've gone through an academy someplace else and they've passed. And then they come onto a department and either they start as a probie in a firehouse or they go through that department's recruit academy. And now all of a sudden you'll have somebody who's pushing that person because that's their personality. They're not thinking they want the recruit to do it the way that department does it. And they say that person can't cut it, we got to push them harder. Well, wait a second. You've already you've already passed, you've already been successful other places. So it feeds right into that attitude about, is there an issue here with that person? And so I think from a supervisory standpoint, if you have that responsibility for the recruit class, you have to try to be very objective and stick to, what are your standards going to be? Can they do it? Can they not? And be very careful about your comments. If you're aware as a supervisor that things are going on negative and you permit that to happen, now we've got a real problem in that department. That's when it really starts to escalate, when people become aware of things and don't do anything to try to mitigate those effects or to eliminate the problem.
And so now, on most of our radio shows, we try to make suggestions to people on what they should do, right? Because it's not just sexual harassment. Again, it could be racial harassment. It could be anything. Gay, gender, religion, whatever it is, right? So I guess I would like to get from you, let's give our listeners, viewers in this case, what do they have to do in their department? Now that we know they're all part of their department, supervisors can create liability by not acting. What do we do? And I guess my first one is we got to have a policy on this. What should the policy say? Let's start with
I think policy and training, but I think that we have standards for what we're going to teach people, but we don't have much in the way of standards in how we're going to teach them. And in particular, in career academies, and I would assume maybe in some of the volunteer academies also, that there's a lack of training of the instructors, not in the subject matter, not in the knowledge of what they need to do, but in the way that they need to deliver the training, and in particular, some of the comments that are made, the tough love type of comments, and some people think that they behave as if they're a drill instructor in boot camp in the military, and that is not going to fly in civilian life. It's just not. Maybe it did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, and maybe if you have an all-white male, and this is terrible to say, but if you have an all-white male academy, then that's one thing, but that's not the reality anymore. So that there has to be policies and procedures geared toward what types of motivation and what types of comments are appropriate and which aren't. And anything that's in any way sexual or discriminatory against ethnicity, religion, or any of those things have got to be off the table.
So maybe a very specific code of conduct for our instructors, code of conduct for our training, a code of conduct for our supervisors, saying what they will and will not allow.
Well, and the supervisors are clearly in a different, it's one thing for a firefighter or a colleague to make a biting comment. That same comment made in the presence of a supervisor who does nothing about it is taken to a different level.
Or a supervisor who makes the comment, actually.
Well, then, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's, you talk about a code of conduct. To me, though, it's just one code of conduct. It's, you're not going to discriminate, you're not going to do this, and then it's a matter of enforcement. Is the department as a whole, whether it's in training, operations, wherever else, going to enforce it? Everything from the hiring to promotion to, it's got to be, the fire department has to be cognizant of all the potential harms that are out there and do whatever it can to address those, because we have now a very diverse fire service.
And so we've got training, we've got policy, supervision. Anything else on?
Well, I just think in the practical application is putting all of that together, and understanding what the ramifications are. And we're into the hundreds and millions of dollars of lawsuits every year on discrimination, sexual harassment, and it's generally firefighters suing the fire departments. Very little monetary loss goes out to somebody that's complaining about we burnt their house down, or some other egregious action that may have been conducted by the fire department, and people feel that they were harmed in some way. But what we're seeing is there's a lot of, we're killing ourselves, basically, financially, because we don't know what the rules are, and if we know what the rules are, and we do have the conduct codes in place, and we do all of the training, we're still violating it. Because I think, in those sort of situations, I think the recruits particularly want to get along. And so they'll laugh and they take it, and so that may encourage that drill instructor or training instructor to continue that sort of conduct, because nobody's telling me to stop. And as soon as somebody tells them to stop, under the law, they're supposed to stop and then try to mitigate this thing at the lowest level possible.
It's almost too late. By the time they tell them to stop, it's almost too late. It's
way beyond the pale there. And then so then people get offended, and then then they're, because they made a complaint, they may be outcast. And so in a recruit academy, and an outcast is a death sentence for a lot of these young recruits. So I think it's just awareness and application, and then just being cognizant of the fact that we're dealing with people. They have sensitivities. They have issues that they bring into their academy and their firefighting life. That we just need to be aware of that.
So let's do some closing comments. We're on a short schedule for today. Why don't we just start with you? Wrap up 30-second comments.
I think the 30-second comment is, just be aware and apply. And when somebody makes a complaint, I think you need to be fairly aggressive in addressing the complaint and try to reach some resolution.
Okay.
A number of years ago at FDIC, there was a big theme about back to basics. And people said, we need to be studying truck and engine company operations. That's what gets people killed. We don't need to worry about, harassment issues. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think we can spend the time on the engine and truck company issues, but I think we need to do this as well. And people have to understand, there may not be a life and death situation in terms of, a firefighter getting killed. The financial impact from that lawsuit can have almost a greater impact on the department as a single firefighter death. So I think we really have to focus on all of these issues and make sure our departments are well-rounded.
Kurt?
I think that we spent a great deal of time focusing on on what we're going to teach in terms of training, and I think we got to focus at least as much attention on how we're going to teach it.
I agree. And I would say we got to change the culture in the fire service. I know we're a generally, male-driven, testosterone-driven. It's okay to beat up everybody in our firehouse, because it's fun, but we got to change our culture a little bit. And for all the reasons you're saying, we just can't afford this anymore. So I want to thank everybody for now watching this portion of Fire Service Court Radio. We hope that you will all join us every couple of weeks on fireengineering.com. On behalf of John, Chip, Kurt, myself, thank you.